Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining us for today's webinar. Thanks to all of you for taking the time out of your busy day to join us. Just before we get started, I just want to make a quick announcement. I'm very pleased to announce that Aqua is returning as a diamond sponsor for DrupalCon next month. If you are attending, be sure to check out our featured sessions, booths, lightning talks, and plenty more. Details will be available on the events section of the Aqua website. Right, I'm thrilled to be kicking off today's webinar as we look at what a cookieless future is going to look like and how you can prepare for that. A few of the usual housekeeping items before we all get started. If any of you do experience any audio issues for any reason, please do let me know through either the Q&A or chat window and I'll be happy to assist. The presentation today is going to last around 25 to 30 minutes, after which we're going to open it up for Q&A and discussion. To that end, I'd really encourage anyone that has any questions throughout the presentation to put them in the chat window or Q&A box. We really value and encourage participation, particularly for a hot topic like today's one. So please do ask questions as and when you have them. Today's webinar is going to be recorded and we will send a link out to the recording in the next couple of days to anyone that is either registered or joined today. That's it from me. So I'll now pass you over to today's speakers, who are Tom Bianchi, the VP of EMEA Marketing, and Alan Botwright, Master Solutions Architect here at Aqua. Alan, over to you.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, so thanks for coming along to the webinar today. I hope you find the content in the presentation useful. Just a quick summary of Aqua, founded in 2007 as an open source digital experience platform. For those that don't know what DXP actually means, it's unlocking value where content meets data and providing tools to create omni-channel digital experiences. So today's topic is around the cookies or a cookieless future primarily. It makes sense to start off with some definitions. Third-party data is, most of you will be familiar with, it's the backbone of a lot of digital marketing. And it's very based on volume, amount of data you're capturing. Typically that data is stored on some random server somewhere. You may buy that data from a vendor of some kind, and it's used to create inbound. First party data is more around data you already own. So data like it lives within your CRM or perhaps your transactional system, or maybe you have some behavioral information, real-time behavioral information. And one you may not have heard of, which is zero-party data, which is a term that was coined by Forrester a couple of years ago now, which is about first-party data, but it's also about the opt-in and opt-out, the permissions around for that. Now, a good way of bringing that to life, all of that to life together, is last week I actually renewed my house insurance. Not the most exciting conversation really, but allow me to explain. I wanted to do this. I was sort of doing two things at the same time, and I decided to use Money Supermarket. And I haven't used services like that for many years, and it's amazing how far these things have come along. Now, effectively, what the mechanic that I experienced there was I was being asked to supply a lot of data to drive an experience, which is basically tailoring me to a product, a very tailored product that suits my needs. But I was quite uncomfortable initially offering a lot more data than I would expect to. Really what I'm comfortable with. So part of that process, which I think Money Supermarket did a very good job of, was making it very clear what that information was driving in terms of the experience I was getting, and also my options to opt out of that information being stored. So effectively what we had was a value exchange. I'm giving more information, my trust is growing, I'm getting what I want out of this very, very quickly. So overall, my impression of the service was very, very, very positive, and I would certainly go back to that. So all these mechanics are playing together here, first party data, the trust aspects of things, all playing out. So hopefully that sort of gives you a bit of an idea of what I mean by these different types of data. So what's going on here? Because there's a lot of confusing information around third party cookies, really, which is the main part of this topic here. Is about 2 years ago, Google decided, basically picking up on the zeitgeist of privacy issues primarily, how can we continue to target information and drive digital advertising without actually getting down to the sort of levels of information that make people uncomfortable effectively. So they've chosen to phase out third-party cookies and basically replace that with something called a cohort analysis, which is a way of taking lookalikes and be able to drive outcomes based on lookalikes, data-driven lookalikes, which actually, if you can see here some of the quotes, like this is a first-party data approach as well, essentially, or from their point of view. This represents a big change. Probably the other one that's worth mentioning, which is coming into effect very quickly, is obviously most of you have heard about Apple and Facebook disputes, and that's to do with Facebook's ability to serve ads and then measure the results of those ads back. Now, effectively, Apple are shutting the door in their face for this, and that will happen in a future, a future release of the Apple iOS. So that's, again, it's forcing Facebook to rethink how they're doing things. But in a way, all of us, it's given all of us an opportunity to look at what this means in the future. Tom.
Thanks, Alan. Yeah, hello everyone. Nice to see you all here. Thanks so much for joining the webinar. So my task here today really is to provide the marketer's view on what this all means. And I don't want to teach anybody to suck eggs here on what is a customer lifecycle, but I wanted to use this slide just to firstly highlight in practical terms, just like Alan's money supermarket example on how we exchange data in terms of value, but where cookies are used throughout the customer lifecycle today. So if you think about the normal customer lifecycle, we've broken it down here into some very standard phases: awareness, interest, consideration, purchase, and then post-purchase with your attention and advocacy plays. But you'll find cookies everywhere in this journey. And yes, I really did just use pictures of cookies on a slide. You're welcome. So let's take an example. In the awareness phase, you're probably doing search engine marketing of some variety, whether you're B2B, B2C, retail. It doesn't really matter. You're trying to take advantage of things like the Google algorithms, either in a paid media sense or in an organic media sense. And all along the way, there are cookies monitoring people's behavior and feeding that back into the system to make sure that the way in which you target your audience, the one that you want to drive traffic towards your digital experience, is the right audience and so on. And there we're looking at driving as much volume of traffic as possible into the top of the funnel so that as they go through the funnel, they drop out and convert. And then in our digital experience journey, we might then pass them over to our website, right? So we've done the search engine marketing, and then during the interest phase, they found your website and they start to browse the products that they're interested in. Well, then you might be using cookie information to look at how to personalize that content on your website. Or if you're a commerce site and you're a retailer, you might be trying to personalize the products that are on offer or recommend products that they might want to buy. As you continue through the journey, cookies are happening everywhere throughout the whole thing. So how do we get to a place where, we're not so reliant on these cookies? And we're going to talk about this today, but I want to start off by firstly thinking about what we know about our customers. This is really important because the recommended approach that we're going to talk about, we want to move away from using third-party data, which Alan defined at the beginning of the call, and start honing in on first and zero-party data. How do we do that, though, when all of the intelligence that we have about our customers today sits in these data silos across the organization? You could have information sat in finance about your customers' past purchase history and how much money they spent with you. You might have information sat in if you've got marketing systems or a CRM system. You can have data about your customer there, about how they've interacted with your email messages that you've sent them, or the website usage information. So the challenge that most organizations have is bringing that together. And then even if they can bring it together, they still struggle to make it actionable. I'm going to give you a little bit of a strange example now, and you're looking at me again thinking, oh, this is the guy who used actual pictures of cookies, and now he's using a picture of Marvin Gaye. What's Marvin Gaye got to do with a cookieless future? Well, bear with me, it's a little bit of a strange analogy, but you'll see where I'm going. So most people know Marvin's I would call it his hallmark song of I heard it through the grapevine. And the analogy that I'm going to bring today is that when you're in the office, all of the juicy bits of gossip from every single department and every different team within your organization, you hear at the water cooler, you hear at the coffee machine, and they're all the juicy bits of information. And then you start to paint this picture of what's going on inside your workplace based on this data points or information points connected across the organization and shared through the grapevine. Well, imagine if we could get all of those juicy bits of data, all of that, that juicy information about your customer from all of the different silos across your organization through the grapevine of your data and make it actionable. Then we'd have these silo walls breaking down, and yes, you might have Marvin Gaye-like data points popping up across your business. So why would we want that? Well, when we get all of these grapevine-led actionable insights from across these multiple data sources, we end up with something where we can actually provide a better service to our customer. So going back to Alan's example, he was giving, because of the value exchange that was happening, Money Supermarket information about when his insurance renewal date was, what car he drove or what size house he had, so that the insurers could provide relevant contextual quotes back from different insurance providers about the service that he liked. And that's really where we recommend that everybody gets to with their brand. Imagine if you had such a relationship with your customer that the data that they were giving you, firstly, you were able to see it across the entire business, but because they had shared it with you, it was valuable and actionable. So, one more example. I've been an Apple user for over a decade now. I've always had an iPhone for as long as I can remember. But who remembers in the early days when you didn't use iCloud, you kind of still had to plug your phone into your laptop and do an iTunes backup of your phone? Well, because I had that, and because now I've moved to iCloud, what's happened with my contacts list in my phone is that I've now got 5 different versions of my wife's phone number logged in my phone. But it's also got like some of our old addresses attached to her contact name, and it's got some of her old email addresses that she no longer used. And making sense of all of that data that's flooding in through the grapevine of your data silos can start to get a little bit tricky. So when you're presented with 5 versions of the truth, how do you know which version of the truth is the right one that you want to click on? Well, we don't want to give away too many spoilers here, but we're heading towards the direction of what is a customer data platform and how that might help solve some of these challenges of the cookieless future. And so we'll definitely come back to that one in a little bit more time.
Thanks, Tom. So I think it's fair to say that most of the marketing activity, particularly around third-party cookies, has always been about volume over sort of specific targeting, and typically using a scattergun approach, and that's usually from a single data source. That usually the campaign is built off some kind of hypothesis, which probably comes from a limited single point of data as well. So it is very much just pointing out we have Jesse from Predator in here, so some way to squeeze that one in there. But we're actually moving to more of a sniper sort of approach. Well, actually, that's one way of looking at it, actually. So I think the idea that we can target with information that from different sources, which is kind of what Tom's grapevine, Marvin Gaye grapevine is about. It's you have different sources of information. What's the information? What's the actionable insight off the back? And what was true yesterday at the water cooler isn't true tomorrow. And that's the other concept as well. If you're building marketing campaigns and they're taking months to actually execute on and derive some insight from, actually, when you're moving into this type of model with first-party data and dynamic audiences, those things are changing dynamically. So not only are you getting better targeting, but also the results are going to be more effective. It's actually more than that, though. It's not just, what we're moving to here is a different way of thinking about how to, it's the situation here where you've typically, most teams we meet in this process when we're talking about sort of customer data platforms are typically around smaller teams expected to do less with more. And it's always the challenge is like, we're working with those single sources of data. How can we unlock value in what data we have already? We have, most organizations I talk to have lots of data. That's not a problem. But be able to what we sometimes call the last mile, get to the last mile. I don't want to have to spend 3 months trying to create a piece of content, create a distribution list for a campaign again, and define some kind of simple KPI. I want my audience to be laid out for me with some automation, and that's machine learning that allows me to be able to sort of target people dynamically. based on multiple touch points, and some of those touch points will change from day to day, like ideas around someone most likely to engage today, or abstract concepts that can only be provided by machine learning. So what we're getting to really is a completely away from the idea of thinking about campaigns, scatterguns, and how you send something out, you measure it, you get some uplift in this, and that looks good, we'll do a bit more of this. But actually you're bringing it back to something far more forensic in approach, and actually in many ways much easier to maintain without having to redefine, create new hypotheses around what's working. Is leveraging machine learning, the Marvin Gaye effect that we talked about earlier on, to be able to drive those experiences. Tom.
Yeah, so now that we know that Marvin Gaye is the equivalent of a machine learning algorithm that can surface all the relevant data points from across your organization and bring it to fruition, let's talk about how we start to apply that to our actual approach and how we go to market and make it really valuable for the organization. So up on the screen, I've got a picture of the current version of most of the businesses that we all work for as funnel, and that's really wide at the top, where we try and get as many different contacts in there as possible, down to the skinny funnel at the bottom, where the purchase happens and where people become our customers as opposed to prospective customers. Well, what we're talking about is actually flipping this on its head and moving to a much more efficient funnel. And rather than trying to get, let's take an example here, rather than trying to get anybody who's ever bought a t-shirt to join the top of our funnel through paid media approach or anything like that, well, we only sell pink t-shirts in size 7 or a size medium t-shirt. So how do we go and use the data that we've got about our existing customers through first party and zero party data and combine that with machine learning models to find people who are likely to go and buy that information again? Or more importantly, how do we attract people who we know are only going to be interested in that very specific type of t-shirt and bring them into the funnel? And while that seems really alien to me, even as a marketer, to have a funnel where we really only ever bring in the most qualified people in the beginning, hopefully you'll see from this illustration that the goal that we're moving towards is a funnel where it's leaner, skinnier, and it's almost like the new year, new me, right? By the time we get down to the bottom of the funnel, the goal is that we actually drive more revenue than before because we're being so targeted and so specific. Conversely, I'd like to throw out an alternative scenario here, and it's a slight inverse way of thinking, but rather than saying, oh, okay, I only sell pink t-shirts in size medium, you could also start to look at, well, what's the real size of my total addressable market for this? So before you even start selling a product, you could identify if it's a market that you want to get into, again, making your funnel more efficient and more optimized and hyper efficient. Okay, so rather than just listening to Alan and I go on, we're going to start to move into a bit more of a discussion phase now. Alan and I are going to have a little bit of a conversation about 3 key elements of what we think is the new model, starting with building trust, and then we'll go through a couple more. Once we get to the bottom of this, we're going to start to apply this theory to technology and how we can use technology to help us. So if you've got any questions, you can start to drop them into the Q&A panel. And in just a few minutes time, we're going to get to the Q&A section. So please ask away with those questions. So first of all, building trust, right? You heard it in the money supermarket example that Alan gave before. To earn somebody's trust to the point where they feel like sharing data with you, you've got to have a value exchange. And it sounds like a buzzword, and it sounds like something that you would hear in marketing week, but really it's the truth of the matter. I wouldn't feel comfortable telling any old website the address of my house and how many bedrooms it had and whether I had 3 reception rooms or 2 in order for them to create a quote for my insurance renewal each year. I'm only going to feel like I will do that and share that information if I'm going to get something in return. And in Alan's example, the information that I'm going to get in return is a service which offers me a comparison between lots of different insurance providers. So how can people build trust with their consumers, with their end users of their digital experience? Well, ultimately, it's about being able to offer some of your expertise, some of your knowledge, or some of your product even as a quid pro quo, as a trade for the information about the customer. Alan, empowering customers, what do you think?
I think it's the example that we've used earlier on, but looking at, say, Apple have been shrewd around here. I think there's a couple of sort of dynamics going on here. One is being able to, for brands to be able to think about this and take this seriously. It's never been a better time to reevaluate this, looking at what data you have. But ultimately, there's two ways of thinking about this. We can either try and do things like we've done before and just find workarounds, but I don't think that's kind of going along with the general vibe out there, what audience our customers are expecting around data privacy. There's zero-party data, and that's probably becoming a data sovereignty issue as well, as we're seeing different parts of the world where data has to be stored in certain locations. That's becoming extremely complicated, and also that those opt-in and opt-out, it's not opt-in once and that's it. It's for each piece of value you're adding slightly more information. That's one example earlier on and putting that back. But I think also looking at, Apple have done a pretty good job of making a big brand statement by leading the charge with what's happening with iOS and Facebook. And so I think this, which side of the fence do you sit on, really? I think it's opportunity to, this is going to happen anyway. There will be workarounds in the short term, but looking at Aqua as well as a business as well, we've been evaluating this for a while now, and our approach is to be very upfront, provide tools to customers to be able to manage this and build the trust with their customers. We see that as the way forward.
Yeah, definitely. I think you touched on a really important point there as well with the data sovereignty, and also that's a great segue to the next conversation point here, and that's privacy. So in and amongst the fact that cookies are being removed, we're also in a state of compliance that varies from country to country, where different privacy laws are coming in. And on top of that, we've got customers' expectation about being able to manage their own privacy coming too, and really the iOS 14.5 update that's dropping imminently from Apple is it is going to be an awakening for many consumers that they can now actually have a better control over their privacy than they've ever had before. So a customer data platform can actually really help people manage some of these issues, or brands manage some of these issues, and really drill into where is their consumer data stored, how do they manage data between different brands if they are an organization that has multiple brands, but while all the time being able to take advantage of the data that they've got from their customers and still personalize the experiences that they have. And that comes back to the Marvin Gaye effect that we talked about before. So Alan, any thoughts on privacy before we move on to defining a CDP?
Yeah, I think it's interesting from the privacy point of view. It's like that the ability to be able to manage that dynamically as well, because you might opt in and out at different points in that experience, different touch points. So that becomes quite a challenge actually, just in terms of how does your system allow you to, you've opted out at one stage, say during a transactional phase, but you've opted into something else, like maybe a web personalization layer. All of that is data points and dynamic data. But then you can't suddenly send an email with more information that's been agreed. So, and if you're dealing with a single system, a marketing automation system, then that might be okay, but that's not going to take you to the next level of experiences than what we're talking about here. But also, it's not a problem when you take it from the point of view of a CDP, because the CDP will allow you to, that's just a natural part of how the CDP works and how the data is having multiple reference points that's creating that profile of the customer, and that idea of a dynamic customer is not going to be the same as it was yesterday or even a couple of hours ago.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I think we've definitely got a couple of questions coming in, which is fantastic. Alan, let's move on to defining a CDP, because I think some of the questions that we've had is what's the difference between a CDP and a CRM system, and another question we've had as well is something about OneTrust, which is a cookie management provider on websites. and how does a CDP interact with that, or does it even replace that? So maybe let's level the playing field with what's a customer data platform.
Yeah, and I'd like to come back to the analysts with this stuff as well. This is a couple of years old now, but I think it sort of cuts to the chase. I mean, this is important because CDP has become a buzzword out there, but I've seen everything from identity platforms that literally are doing the most basic of authentication, through to CRM plus is described as. So systems that are ultimately, there may be sources of sales intelligence and customer record system of record, but they're not designed to be able to provide insight, real-time insight, and a mixture, because they're not designed architecturally to be able to process data at that scale. On our first slide, we showed earlier on, we're already dealing with 25 billion transactions a day across our customer base. That's a lot of data, but that's possible. That sounds like a terrifying amount of a high number. But when your architecture underneath that, and you're also utilizing cloud computing in a way it was to be able to process through that, and that's important. That's from day one. You don't bolt that capability onto the back of a CRM. Because what a CDP is doing is you're looking at different data sources. Some of that data is real time, and some of it's batch data that's pulled in, and that's constantly being looking at reference points from one system to the next, and that's constantly happening in that process. And by doing that, it's servicing that grapevine information that's useful, that allows you to then drive your campaigns. That is not an easy thing to do, but it's a very different approach. So for a CDP, that foundation of clean, intelligent customer data, obviously you want analytics off the back of this, like to be able to prove out your spend around your return on investment, spend around content creation, those kind of things. That's going to be easy. You can have the data that allows you to be able to do that and justify spend there. And ultimately then moving that experience across any channel as well. These things by nature, they are omni-channel. We're not just thinking purely about outbound, inbound around there, where if you're using a chatbot or a voice interface or some kind of, we even have the context where customers have context of like direct mail campaigns that come in, call centers that have updated, those kind of things. So I would say, Tom, this won't be one for you to talk about here as well. You know a bit more about the real CDP as well, in terms of just defining it as well. It's interesting to get a third-party view of this.
Yeah, definitely. So to summarize Alan's slide from before, what a CDP is doing is effectively taking all of the data across your organization, running a machine learning algorithm to find those really important Marvin Gaye moments, those insights of data, and then giving you actionable insights. So, you know, using my pink t-shirt example, you'd be able to find all of the people who want a size medium pink t-shirt and recommend that you send an email to those people tomorrow with a 20% off coupon so that they can get discount on buying a size medium pink t-shirt from you. And that's really where a CRM system isn't able to do that, right? A CRM system is a system of record. A CDP is a system of generating actionable insights. And so we wanted to make sure here at Aqua that our CDP was up to the task, and so partnered with the CDP Institute to basically audit our own CDP. Really pleased to say that we passed with flying colours in all marks, and that's great news for us, but also good news for you. And if you're in the market for a CDP, you should look at some of the research and studies that the real CDP have done, and they'll really paint the landscape for you and help you understand the difference between a CDP, a CRM, a data management platform as well. So we're moving on to some of the questions now, and there's been loads of questions coming in. So I'm going to go through some of these, and I'm going to try and answer them in kind of the right order, if that makes sense, to help everybody go on the journey together. So one of the questions here is from Stephen. Thanks, Stephen. So can a CDP work alongside a CRM? Alan?
100%. The CDP doesn't replace the CRM. A CRM serves, like I mentioned earlier, as a source of sales intelligence, or customer as a source system of record. And it's often the case where the CDP itself is taking data that was within the CRM and enriching that data with other, say perhaps behavioral data, real-time data, or even that's been enriched by third-party data. I still think there's a place for third-party data. You're still going to consume services from Google and from Facebook in a slightly different form, what that is doing is actually all this data is enriching a profile that a user and telling you more. Now the result of that process may end up enriching your CRM data. And if you've got, say, reps, some companies have reps that are doing outbounding that way, then that's still in insight that's been enriched by the CDP. So it's not a replacement for it. It's a good question, actually, on that point with the CDP, real CDP as well. Interesting, missing in terms of criteria, meeting the criteria was Salesforce itself. And it comes back to that point I was making later on, where they're in the business of doing CRM. No one does CRM better than Salesforce, but it's not CDP. Yeah. It's a different type of product.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm actually going to go backwards a step in the funnel. We've had a great question here from Saeed, and he's written, everything you're talking about happens once people have come on to your digital platform. And what about a cookie-free future in terms of bringing people into the platform? So you heard us talk about this a little bit at the beginning of the webinar, but each of those mega vendors that we highlighted, Apple, Facebook and Google, have all got their own solution to the problem. Let's start with the Google one, and Alan can correct me if I go a little bit off piece technically here, because I'm not so technically minded. I am a marketer after all, but effectively they're using anonymized cohort analysis, which is where they're looking at buyers completely anonymously, and people that use their search service and other platforms, and then grouping people anonymously, whereas before a cookie is effectively tied to you as an individual, and so it's not anonymous, and that's where the privacy play comes in. So those third-party organizations, those mega tech vendors and mega tech giants across the marketing universe will be changing their solution. So you can still drive traffic using their actions, but the key here is that you're not going to be able to rely on cookies that are maybe on your website to tie them back to individual users anymore. They're going to become anonymous as browsers like Chrome and Firefox start to block cookies altogether, in fact. Is that right, Alan?
Yeah, that sounds really good.
Good, I managed to pull that off.
I think it's that as well. It's the importance of, if you look at what Google are doing, it's that idea of the cohort analysis as well. You can achieve the same outcome, or near enough the same outcome, without actually going to the level of dropping these cookies. Because if you look at things like other products like DMPs you may be familiar with, they're basically massive repositories of third-party data. And as soon as you cut the cookie legs off of that, that's a bunch of data that says what against who, because its provenance is gone. So I think also there's always been a bit of the third-party cookies always been a bit, its volume has helped here, but it's not particularly targeted. So you're going to potentially get a better type of targeting from Google. I mean, there are some questions around their management of cohorts along the lines of your business requirements as well, because obviously if you're maintaining a list of cohorts and you're a financial services business versus a retail business selling t-shirts or something like that, it's going to check. So there's some questions around that as well. But a lot of this as well is once you've got people into your system, is making that experience as best as it can be as well. And what we're losing out there is improving that side of things. So it's a mixture of these things. But there will be services coming from, I'm not quite sure what Facebook are planning to do, but a lot more work with their API will be involved. It'll get more complex to achieve some of their outcomes than it currently is.
Yeah, I've seen already Facebook starting to up how they connect to other third-party services. So they've been making a lot of announcement recently about their native integrations with commerce applications, for example, like Shopify. So now within Shopify, you're able to, and this is obviously a bit more small, medium than large commerce players, but you're able to launch Facebook ads directly from inside Shopify like never before. And you're able to import on-platform leads from Facebook directly into Shopify, so that you get that consented first-party data trading between platforms instead of relying on third-party data and moving between the two.
I think one thing to add to that as well on the privacy as well, which I forgot to mention earlier on, is it's interesting how a retail event or webinar the other day, and people talking about responsibilities. There's often a lot of emphasis on the platform. So if the platform can connect this data, it must be okay. And that's absolutely not the case. The responsibility sits firmly with the brands as well. So again, this first-party data, it's your data, what you want to do with your data, how do you want to maintain that experience, how's your zero-party data, your opt-in, opt-working, that's all on you guys to figure that stuff out. You can't rely on those big big platforms
Yeah.
to give you the steer on that. They're always going to walk right on the edge of what's allowed.
Perfect segue to another question here we've got, which is, can a CDP help with consent management across different channels? Thoughts on that one, Alan?
Yeah, I mean, yes, it can, because you have the ability to deal with real-time data as well as batch data. So one of those layers is going to be opt-in, opt-out, and then that might be provided by another third-party service that's tracking that, or it could be you can do it yourself, depends on the experiences themselves. But if you're capturing form information, opt-in or out, and you're presenting that, and there's something that's accessible in your experiences that's like, yes, actually, I want to give some more information, or actually, I want to retract that piece of information. I mean, part of that stuff we should technically be doing already as part of GDPR from a few years ago. I think because of there's not been a lot of investigations into rule breakers there, because mainly because of COVID, and they've sort of, I think, suspect that people have held back. It's not been the priority, if you get the idea, but there'll be a big focus on that, and I think these things will come together. But absolutely, you can do this with the CDP, because if you're controlling the data that's responsible for opt-in, opt-in out, and even that data existing in multiple systems, that doesn't matter either. The CDP blurs the lines between those systems.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also this is that point is not only can a CDP help you, but I think this comes back to what we're actually suggesting with this webinar, and that's that not just that a CDP can definitely help bring all of this into something that's actionable for you, but also it's about changing your approach, right? So instead of having a website that sort of buries its preference center somewhere at the bottom of the pile in like a footer link that you're supposed to go to find if you want to manage whether you receive newsletters about this or whether they contact you via SMS as well as your mobile phone or cell phone. This is about making how customers interact with your brand front and center, and following the kind of direction that Apple have gone here, and empowering your customer to manage that in a really transparent way. And then by doing that, you've already created a value exchange of trust there. You're saying to them, to your customers, hey, we want to know whether you want to hear from us or not, because hey, if I was a marketer and somebody had raised their hand and said, oh yeah, I want to hear about special offers on pink t-shirts, please, that's incredibly valuable. So I think the combination of a CDP plus a changing approach to how you manage your customer data and empowering them to tell you what they want to hear about is definitely the key. Okay, so we've had another question here, which is one actually, Alan, that you and I have talked about before, and that's, are there specific milestones on cookies that we should be aware of? There isn't like a GDPR date. There's no 24th of May 2018, is there? It's something happening. Yeah, well, if you're a marketer, that date was kind of etched on the inside of your head for a very long time. But there's no drop dead date here, is there? This is happening over from any time now onwards, really.
Yeah, I think that the most immediate one that the impact will be the iOS change with Facebook. And I think Google's planned somewhere around sort of between this time next year. But already, I think it's a kind of not an on-off switch, more of a slider. I mean, some browsers are already blocking third-party cookies like Firefox, that kind of thing. But I think this is Chrome's most widely used browser. That will be the big change as soon as that version of Chrome is updated. So that's on track for next year.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, cool. We've got loads of questions, which I love. Let's have a quick look and see here what we got. Okay, so would your product, I assume you're talking about RCDP, integrate with the likes of OneTrust on privacy management? So again, I think it's not a replacement for a privacy management tool on your website, right? But Alan, what do you think about the future of privacy management tools like that?
Yes, I mean, there's some features of what that does that could be replicated, and potentially there's some savings to be done there, but nothing, it's just not a data source. If that data source is available to the CDP, so if you want to manage it within a system like that, that's absolutely fine. And the idea is that we have customers with CDPs that in some extreme cases have got 700 data points, and others that have 5. It depends what you're trying to achieve. One of those, certainly the opt-in, opt-out thing it's not an optional one anymore, for sure. And some people I'm seeing a lot of people haven't really implemented that in an effective way. It's kind of opt-in at the start and that's it. And I think that has to change if we're going to go and start to deliver this type of experience and trust and get that value exchange going on. We're going to have to do better, and we have to be able to make that stuff accessible. So therefore, having real-time systems that can track in and out in this way becomes essential.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, we've got loads of questions. I'm going to go quick. We've probably got time for 2 or 3 more. Are you seeing the use of third-party cookies and platforms becoming an obsolete use case? If so, do you see there being a need for consolidated functionality into a single platform? And is there realistically a single platform that can cover all bases? Wow, look at that. That's a meaty question, isn't it?
Sure. I don't think it's a case of a single platform. I think it's, as we're saying, it's bringing data from different sources again, and some of that. I don't think we're ever being in a situation where, well, I mean, our philosophy for things, in generally Aqua philosophy is best of breed, bringing in different technologies. I think if anyone can generate, I think unless you take the China model and you've got a single application that everybody uses, I know that's one model which I seriously don't think will ever work outside of China. Although I've seen some experiments in other parts of the world that are going along those lines, but no, it's about pulling data from different sources and then creating outcomes based on those multiple data sources. It's not one source of truth here, and this is where it's just sort of coming back to that point. We need multiple data points to drive these experiences.
Yeah, definitely, and I think I would also add to that as well that I don't think we would ever advocate for using a single platform as the be all and end all, because by the time you've implemented it, then how we use technology will have changed again. And so the key is being open, flexible, and able to pull data in from multiple sources, right?
Yeah, but also that you're not locking yourself into anything. We'd say a best of breed. There will be features and capabilities and services that there may be a new social platform. There's some interesting movement around voice-based social platforms happening at the moment, where that may become a marketeer's tool in some way. So be able to bring that another data set, you're not having to unplug a load of other stuff and rebuild things. You're just hooking in another data set, and that's fine. Yeah,
definitely. Okay. I think I'm going to take one more question from here, and then I'm going to move towards wrapping up. So we've got one from Jason here. Is this ultimately reliant on single sign-on? If so, what about those organizations who won't benefit from a sign-on, for example, many non-profits? Well, I think that's quite an interesting one, because there's 2 different things going on there, isn't there?
Well, it's not SSO, because that is a one-to-one level. It's cohort-based. So what we're doing is, the difference is, yes, there is obviously option if people are logged into a service, then you know who they are, right? That's fine. And SSO may be a mechanism that's used to authenticate that person. But actually what you're doing more of most of the time is not authenticated experiences. They are anonymous to extent, but they're not anonymous, they're cohort-based. So the CDP itself is fundamentally similar to what I described what the Google are doing, which is a cohort lookalikes. Those lookalikes will change. People in your audience will be grouped differently, down to what was true of yesterday isn't true today. So that is it. So you're creating those out. You don't need to go to a one-to-one level, and certainly SSO isn't. There are 2 subjects, but hopefully that makes sense, that cohorts versus SSO.
Yeah, exactly. And so SSO, you may or may not have that as part of your digital experience for your end user, right? But you don't need SSO at all to have a CDP. Those things are very different. And the other thing that I would add there as well is you're seeing the rise of different people providing their own SSOs as a service. So Apple now have one, Google have had one for a while, Microsoft is starting to bring one online as well. So they're all in the mix. And I think really our advice there would be, think about your customer experience, and does it need to be something that's a signed in experience, or can it be anonymous, and remove friction from your customer experience at any opportunity, right? Okay, so I wanted to thank everybody who's asked a question. We didn't quite get to them all. We got through loads of them. Thank you for that interactivity. Let me just wrap things up. And Alan, if I miss any key points, you can catch me here. But in summary, the cookieless future is coming, and those tech giants that we highlighted at the start have launched their triggers. They're off to the races, and their changes are happening over the next year. Pay attention to how that's going to impact your digital experience, and think about, firstly, dealing with any immediate fixes that you need to as a fallout of those changes. Like if you rely heavily on Facebook ads, for example, you need to have a look at those now. Moving forward, think about how you can unlock the data that's already inside your organization, even if it's trapped inside of silos. There might be things that you can do quickly without a CDP, but our recommendation really is to start looking at a CDP, particularly if you're going to be dealing with lots of anonymous data that you need to cohort and turn into that beautiful Marvin Gaye-like insight. Finally, CDPs don't replace CRM systems. They don't replace anything else. They harness the power of the data across your organization, use machine learning to help you find the right people to talk to at the right time with the right contextual offer. And ultimately, that's going to get you to your new skinny funnel, the new me of your funnel, your new year, new me, which will hopefully yield much better revenue results at the end of it and keep you as efficient and lean and lean, mean fighting machine all the way through your funnel. We've had some fantastic questions today. In case you missed that at the start, we'll be providing the slides in the form of a recording after the event. And if you've got any specific questions or you'd like to talk to us about how this was going to apply to your organization, please reach out to us directly. You can fill out the contact us form on aqua.com and one of our team will be back to you straight away. We'll send out a follow-up email. You can reply to that too. I'd like to say thanks to Alan for being here with me today and holding my hand through this technical journey of discovery. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, everyone.